An old man walks alone through a garden he built 40 years ago. The paths were laid in straight lines once. Now the weeds have their own opinion about where the paths go. A pool that used to catch the sunrise now holds algae. That water holds the reflection of a king nobody bows to anymore, because there is no one left in the garden to bow. He built this place when he had more gold than he could count, and more wives than he could name. He had more music playing in his palace at any given hour than most kingdoms here in a year. He is Solomon. He is the son of David and Bathsheba, a woman whose own story carried more scandal and grief than most families survive. Solomon was the third king of Israel. He was the wisest man who ever lived, according to God himself. God once appeared to Solomon in a dream and gave him exactly what he asked for. You would think a man like that dies satisfied. He does not die satisfied. Near the end of his life, Solomon sits down and dictates a scroll. It is not a victory speech or a list of his achievements, though he could fill 10 scrolls with those. It is closer to a confession. This scroll is spoken by an old man who has run every experiment available to a human being. He is now telling you, plainly, what he found. Buried near the end of that scroll, after 11 chapters, there is one key sentence. That sentence undoes almost everything that came before it. It is so different in tone from the rest of the book that scholars have argued for centuries about how it got there. We are going to get to that sentence, but not yet. First, you need to understand what drove him to write it. The scroll is called Ecclesiastes. In Hebrew, its title is Koheleth, which means something like the one who gathers an assembly, or simply, the teacher. The very first thing the teacher says, before he tells you a single story, is this: vanity of vanities. All is vanity. The Hebrew word behind that phrase is hevel. It shows up in this short book roughly 38 times. This is more than in almost any other book of the Bible put together. The word hevel does not really mean vanity, not in the way you use it today. It does not mean pride, or arrogance, or looking in a mirror too long. Instead, hevel means vapor or breath. It is like mist on a cold morning that you can see clearly and reach for, but never once hold in your hand. That is the word Solomon chooses 38 times to describe his own life. Pleasure is vapor, wisdom is vapor, wealth, power, buildings, and legacy are all vapor, vapor, vapor. This is not a story about a failed king. It is not about a bitter old man who lost his faith somewhere along the way. This is not a story about giving up on God. Instead, this is the most honest confession in the whole of Scripture. It was written by a man who had every reason to feel finished and satisfied, yet he felt completely neither. You have felt a version of this. Maybe not with a kingdom, but perhaps with a job you finally got or a relationship you landed. Maybe it was a goal you chased for years, and the day you reached it, something went quiet. It went quiet in a way you did not expect. It was not a peaceful quiet, but a flat quiet. Solomon felt that flatness on a scale no human being before or since has ever had the immense financial resources to thoroughly test. He had the power to build anything and the wisdom to understand almost everything. He used every bit of it deliberately, like a man running a controlled experiment on his own life, to answer one key question. Does any of this fill the hole? Stay with me, because what he found is not what you expect, and the ending is not what you have been told. You would think a man with everything would start his testing with wealth. Solomon does not. He starts instead with pleasure. Pleasure is the first thing any of us reach for when we want to feel something other than empty. Solomon wrote, "I said in my heart, go to now, I will prove thee with mirth, therefore enjoy pleasure." That is his own account. This shows how the experiment began. It was not stumbled into, but chosen and deliberate. It was a king running a controlled test on his own life, and pleasure was subject number one. You can easily picture the scene. Wine was poured by servants trained for nothing else. Musicians were brought from every corner of a massive kingdom. Solomon built vineyards, pools, and orchards of every kind of fruit tree, watered by channels he designed himself. He made gardens and parks filled with fruit trees, and he built houses. He dug pools of water to irrigate a forest of young trees, engineering complex systems that would still be studied by later kings for their sophistication. He denied his eyes nothing they desired, and he denied his heart no joy. For a while, joy is exactly what he got. Pleasure always delivers on the first few doses, which makes it dangerous. It works perfectly until it doesn't. Then Solomon looked at all the works his hands had made, and at the intense labor he had done. Behold, all was vanity and chasing after wind. It was hevel again, vapor again. He drank the best wine available in the ancient world. Yet it left the same aftertaste as everything else, which is to say, no taste at all once the moment passed. Every garden he walked through eventually looked the same to him, and every single orchard blurred into the last. A man can only stand in front of so many beautiful things before beauty itself stops registering. Solomon reached that point faster than anyone in history because nobody else had the resources to build so much in a single lifetime. Here's what most people completely miss about this part of the book. Solomon is not telling you pleasure is evil. Instead, he is telling you pleasure is small. It is simply too small to hold a human soul the size of yours. You were built with an appetite that no orchard, wine cellar, music, or laughter was ever designed to satisfy completely. Solomon found the edges of that human appetite faster than any other being in recorded history. He was the only person who ever possessed the resources to hit every wall at once. So he set pleasure down and picked up wisdom instead. This turning point is where the story gets its most famous historical witness. Word of Solomon's understanding reached a queen far to the south, in a land called Sheba, likely located in what is now Yemen or Ethiopia. She had heard the incredible reports, but did not fully believe them at first. So she loaded camels with spices, gold, and precious stones, making the long journey north to see for herself. When she arrived, she tested Solomon with hard questions designed to expose a man who is all reputation. She wanted to see if he had no substance. Solomon answered every one of her questions, and nothing was hidden from him. The record tells us he spoke of trees, from the cedar in Lebanon to the hyssop growing out of a stone wall. He spoke of beasts, birds, creeping things, and fish. His understanding stretched from the throne room to the riverbank. Centuries later, the Jewish historian Josephus described this encounter in Antiquities of the Jews. Josephus expanded on the biblical account, painting Solomon's court in great detail. He described the gold overlay on the walls, the ivory throne, and the sheer scale of a kingdom that had no rival in that part of the world. According to the record, the Queen of Sheba was left completely breathless. There was no more spirit left in her. You would think that moment was the absolute high point of Solomon's life, with a foreign queen before his throne. In one sense it was. But watch what Solomon does with it in his own writing years later. He does not linger there at all. He moves past it in a single verse, like mentioning an old trophy gathering dust on a dark shelf. Wisdom, it turns out, has its own wall too. Solomon says it directly, "In much wisdom is much grief, and he that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow." The more he understood, the more he saw how much heavy suffering exists. No amount of understanding can fix it. He could explain the world, but he could not heal it. He wrote 3,000 proverbs and composed over 1,000 songs, yet not one of them stopped a single funeral from happening. Pay attention to this major turn, because most retellings of Solomon's life skip it entirely. Wisdom did not fail Solomon because it was false. It failed to satisfy him because it was never designed to act as a savior. Wisdom was designed to be a light, and Solomon was asking a light to also be a home. So he set wisdom down too, still valuable but no longer worshipped. He reached for the thing every ancient king wanted when nothing else worked: gold. You must understand the scale here, because this was not comfortable wealth. This was wealth that had never existed in that world before and would not return for centuries. 1 Kings tells us Solomon's yearly income in gold was huge. His wealth was staggering, on top of tribute from merchants, Arabian kings, and governors. He made silver as common in Jerusalem as stones on the ground. He also had stables full of horses and a large merchant fleet. His fleet sailed for exotic goods every 3 years. He had a throne overlaid with ivory and fine gold, with lions standing at the armrests. It was completely unlike anything made before or since in any other kingdom. For a brief moment, hope flickers here. If pleasure and wisdom could not do it, surely this wealth could. Surely enough gold, security, and clear proof of favor from God himself would finally quiet that inner ache. "He that loveth silver shall not be satisfied with silver," Solomon writes, "and he that loveth abundance with increase." This also is vanity. The hope curdles fast. This immense wealth did not calm the appetite, it grew it. Every acquisition simply revealed a slightly larger emptiness sitting right behind it, patient and waiting for the next purchase to fail. He had reached the absolute ceiling of what a human could accumulate in the ancient world. That ceiling turned out to be made of the exact same vapor as everything below it. There is a fourth experiment Solomon barely admits to in this scroll, though its weight clearly shadows everything he writes. 1 Kings tells us plainly that Solomon loved many foreign women. He married into royal houses across the region for alliance and prestige, until the historical record says he had 700 wives and 300 concubines. These women, the text says, without softening it, turned away his heart after other gods. The man who wrote famous proverbs about the danger of a wandering heart could not keep his own fragile heart from wandering. The man who could answer any question the Queen of Sheba brought could not answer the pull of his own desire. That failure never gets its own chapter, but you can feel its heavy weight underneath every line of his confession. A man does not write this honestly about emptiness unless he has discovered in a personal way that his own wisdom was not enough to protect him from himself. He ran 3 experiments: pleasure, wisdom, and wealth. These were run by the one man who had the means to test them at full scale, with no budget, no rival, and no excuse. 3 times, the same word rises from the page like smoke from a fire that never catches: hevel. There were 3 experiments and 3 failures, yet Solomon is not even halfway finished testing. All turned to vapor in the hands of the one man in history who was given a truly unlimited budget to test them with. You might be wondering what is even left to try. There is one more thing you need to see, because it gets stranger before it gets clearer. Soon you will watch Solomon's own son lose almost everything his father built. This happens in real time, proving a line Solomon wrote years before it occurred. You are also going to hear the most famous poem in the entire book, the one about seasons, and you will understand its deep meaning. You will see why it is far darker than the common wall art versions let on. If this is the first time you have heard Ecclesiastes explained like this, take a second to subscribe and drop a thoughtful comment below. Tell me which of Solomon's 3 experiments hits closest to home for you right now: pleasure, wisdom, or wealth. Now let's keep going, because the hardest part of Solomon's honest confession is still ahead of us. You would expect a man like Solomon to at least keep what he built, but he does not. This is where the story stops being about Solomon's own heart and starts being about every single person who comes after him. Solomon writes something strange in the middle of his confession, a line that reads like a prophecy about his family. Yea, I hated all my labor under the sun, because I should leave it unto the man that shall be after me. He asks, who knoweth whether he shall be a wise man or a fool? Solomon is not speaking in generalities. He had a son named Rehoboam. Within one generation, everything Solomon spent 40 years building came completely apart. Watch what happens next, because the kingdom did not fall to an invading army, famine, or plague. It fell because a son ignored good advice. When Rehoboam took the throne, the elders who served his father spoke to him plainly. They said to speak kindly to the people, ease their heavy labor, and they will serve you forever. But Rehoboam turned instead to the young men he grew up with, the ones who had never carried a heavy burden or lost a friend. He took their harsh advice. Gathered at Shechem, the people waited for a decision. My father made your yoke heavy, he told them, but I will make it heavier. My father chastised you with whips, but I will use scorpions. 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel walked away that same day under a rival leader named Jeroboam. A kingdom Solomon spent decades assembling, gold by gold and treaty by treaty, split in 2 before his son had worn the crown a full year. The labor of a lifetime was handed to one who did not labor for it, exactly as Solomon feared while he was still alive. You have probably felt a smaller version of that fear when you build something important at work. Whether it is a process, a team, or a reputation, you wonder what happens after you leave the room. You raise a child with everything you have, yet you cannot control what they choose to do with it once you are gone. Solomon lived that anxiety at the scale of an entire nation, and Ecclesiastes tells you he was right to be afraid. It gets stranger though. Solomon widens the lens until it covers everyone everywhere for all time. There is a famous poem in the middle of this book that you have likely heard before. To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under heaven. There is a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. People frame that poem in calligraphy and hang it in nurseries because it appears beautiful on the surface. However, it is not comforting the way most people think it is. Read it in context, and you will notice something important. Solomon is not celebrating the rhythm of life. He is describing a wheel that never lets you off. Birth answers to death, and planting answers to plucking up. Silence answers to speech, which answers back to silence. Every good thing you build gets undone, and every broken thing gets rebuilt eventually on a loop. This loop has no exit ramp for a human being trying to make sense of where they stand inside it. Solomon writes elsewhere that the thing which hath been is that which shall be, and that which is done shall be done again. There is no new thing under the sun. Here is the part nobody tells you about that poem. It is not a comfort verse at all. It is a confession that even time itself refuses to hold still long enough for you to feel finished. There is a Hebrew word that appears throughout these chapters, one you have already heard without realizing it. Ruach. It is the same word for wind, the same word for breath, and remarkably, the same word for spirit. This is the very word used for the breath God breathed into Adam in the garden. When Solomon says he is chasing ruach, wind, or breath, he uses a word so loaded that ancient readers felt its heavy weight instantly. He is not just saying his pursuits felt pointless. He means they felt like trying to grab hold of the invisible force that gives life itself, something you feel moving across your skin, but can never close your hand around. There is a second word worth knowing because it shows up almost every time Solomon talks about work: amal. It does not simply mean labor. It carries the sense of labor that hurts, with sweat and strain built into it. Solomon is not describing a man who dislikes his job. He is describing the ache of effort itself, the muscle-deep tiredness of pouring yourself into something for years, only to watch the wind, the ruach, carry it away. The results vanish before you even finish counting them. Then Solomon delivers what might be the most quietly devastating verse in the entire book, one that has absolutely nothing to do with kings or kingdoms at all. I returned, he writes, and saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong. Neither yet is bread to the wise, nor riches to understanding, nor favor to skill, but time and chance happen to all. Read that as many times as you need to. The fastest runner does not always win, and the strongest army does not always survive. The wisest planner does not always eat well. Time and chance touches absolutely everyone. This occurs regardless of how hard they worked, or how well they played by the rules. You have watched this happen. The careful person gets the diagnosis, while the reckless person gets a major corporate promotion. The good employee gets laid off, while the office politician gets promoted instead. Solomon is not being cynical when he tells you this. He is being honest about a pattern you already knew was true deep down inside. You knew it long before you had the courage to say it out loud. Pleasure, wisdom, and wealth could not hold him. Family could not guarantee his legacy, and time itself refused to sit still and let him feel finished. One by one, every pillar a human life is normally built on has been tested by the one man with enough resources to do so at full scale. One by one, every single pillar has cracked under the heavy weight of the same word. That word is hevel, meaning vapor and chasing after ruach. There is only one place left for Solomon to look, the place every human being eventually has to look, whether king or servant. That is exactly where we go next. This is not a story about a wise man losing his nerve, or about faith running out or a life wasted. This is a story about the one door every human life eventually walks through, and what Solomon found on the other side. There is one final place Solomon has not looked yet. He saved it for last, not because he forgot, but because he was afraid of it the entire time. It is like avoiding a phone call you know you have to make. That place is death. Solomon looks straight at it, and what he says next is harder than anything before. He watches the wise man and the fool walk toward the exact same grave. He said in his heart that what happens to the fool happens to him too. He asks why he was then more wise, for there is no long remembrance of the wise more than of the fool. Seeing that which now is in the days to come shall all be forgotten, he declares, "Therefore I hated life." Read that again. Therefore I hated life. This is the wisest man who ever lived, the man God gave unique wisdom to in a dream, telling you plainly that he reached a point where the sheer weight of it all made him hate being alive. You may have felt an echo of that. It is not despair exactly, but something quieter and more exhausting. It is the night you realize that everyone you love and every project you poured yourself into will face the same end. Everything eventually gets covered by the same silence. The brilliant scientist and the toddler who never learned to speak share the same grave. The wealthy billionaire and the man who owned nothing share it too. Solomon watched that truth from the highest seat any human has ever occupied, and it flattened him. He had buried his father, loyal servants known since boyhood, wives who turned his head, and advisors who made him laugh. Every funeral he attended was a rehearsal for his own. No amount of gold in his treasury could buy him one extra day once his own name was called. Yet, this is where it gets remarkable instead of stopping in the grave. Instead of stopping in despair, Solomon does something nobody expects from a book this honest. He starts talking directly to the young. Remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth, while the evil days come not. He speaks of the years drawing nigh, when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them. He is not writing for kings, but for anyone young enough to choose where they aim their life, before the choice gets made for them. This choice can be stolen by exhaustion, regret, or running out of time. He describes old age in vivid language, noting the grinders, ceasing because they are few, and the windows of sight darkening for the old man. He sees the almond tree blossoming white like the hair on an old head. This is a father at the end of life, grabbing you by the shoulders through a 3,000-year-old scroll, telling you not to wait as long as he did. A tradition preserved in the Babylonian Talmud says Solomon wrote 3 books across his life. He wrote Song of Songs in his youth, when passion ran hot, and Proverbs in his middle years when wisdom had fully matured. Proverbs provided practical instruction for living. Ecclesiastes came last in old age, when everything had been tested and only honesty remained. Whether or not that exact order is provable, the pattern rings deeply true. It rings true to anyone whose certainties have been tested by time. The young man writes about love. The grown man writes about how to live well. The old man writes about what actually mattered once the noise died down. Now we finally return to the garden. Picture the old king walking alone at dusk, past the algae-covered pool and the weeds pushing up between stones he laid decades earlier. Remember the special sentence I told you about? It was buried near the end of this scroll, undoing almost everything before it. We are there now. Let us hear the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God shall bring every work into judgment, with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. Read it slowly, because this comes after 11 chapters of hevel, vapor, chasing wind, and wisdom that grieves. It follows wealth that never satisfies, and a grave waiting for the wise man and the fool alike. Yet Solomon does not end in despair. Instead, he ends in a doorway. Everything under the sun is vapor, yes. Every pleasure, possession, and accolade you stack beneath the sun will eventually dissolve in your hands exactly the way it dissolved in his. But Solomon shows there is a difference between things found under the sun. There is a massive difference between creation and the one who made the sun in the first place. Fear God and keep his commandments. That is not a simple rule tacked onto the end of a sad, empty book. This is the only foundation strong enough to hold weight that pleasure, wisdom, and wealth were never built to carry. This is the great twist nobody tells you about Ecclesiastes. It does not end in dark nihilism. Instead, it spends 11 chapters proving every other foundation will collapse. By chapter 12, you have no illusions left standing except one. Nothing under the sun was ever meant to hold your whole weight. It is not the sun itself, the wine, the gold, or the applause. The only foundation built to hold a human soul is the Creator who exists above the sun entirely. You have likely felt this exact pattern in your own way. Consider the job you finally landed, where by the second week the shine was already fading. Or the house you paid off, where relief lasted a month before something else started nagging at you. You chase goals for years. You cross them off the list, and within days you are already asking, now what? That flat feeling is not a personal failure. It is the same feeling Solomon described long ago while standing in a garden he built. He had his own wealth and wisdom, yet he watched weeds grow between the stones. It is hevel working exactly as it always works, showing you gently and repeatedly that nothing under the sun was built to be your God. Solomon spent 40 years and every resource a human could ever access discovering something you can learn in one sitting, if you are willing to hear it. Fear God and keep his commandments. That is everything. That is the whole duty of a person. So what do you actually do with all of this knowledge? Here is the first thing worth carrying with you. Hevel does not mean nothing matters. It never meant that a single time. It never meant that across 12 chapters. It means nothing under the sun, held by itself, was built to carry the full weight of your life. It cannot be your career, your bank account, your reputation, or your best day. Every one of those things is real, and every one of those things is good. Yet they are still vapor when you ask them to be your God. Here is the second thing, and this one is deeply personal, so let it land with you. Every pleasure you chase right now, every achievement you think will settle the noise in your chest, and every possession on your wish list will feel like vapor in your hands the exact moment you finally acquire it. This happens unless it is held inside something larger than itself. That is not a curse on your ambition. That is Solomon, at the end of an unrepeatable life, warning you so you do not spend 40 years finding out the hard way. Here is the third thing. which should stay with you longest. The wisest and richest man who ever lived, wiser than anyone who ever sat on a throne, spent decades testing every possible answer to life's ultimate question. He wanted to see what makes a life worth living. In the end, he handed you the answer in a single verse, small enough to memorize before you finish your next cup of coffee. Fear God and keep His commandments. That is the whole of a person. It is not just for the wealthy, wise, or powerful, but the whole of a person. You do not need Solomon's gold to have what he found. You just need to stop chasing the wind sooner than he did. So here is a crucial question worth sitting with. Of everything Solomon tried, pleasure, wisdom, wealth, or legacy, which one are you most tempted to lean your whole weight on right now? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read them, and I promise you are not the first person to feel exactly what Solomon felt in that garden. Once again, an old man walks alone through a garden he built 40 years ago, seeing the changes time has brought. The weeds have their own opinion about where the path should go now, and the pool holds green algae instead of the bright sunrise. But despite the decay of his creation, he is no longer despairing in this place. He set the scroll down because he finally said what he needed to say. Somewhere far above the sun, in a glorious place vapor cannot reach, and gold cannot buy, something incredibly durable is still securely standing. It is patiently waiting for anyone who is willing to stop chasing the wind long enough to find it. The timeless truth remains open for all who look beyond the vapor of this world to find true, eternal meaning.